I just want to speak the name of Jesus.
There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the inheritance." The story of the prodigal son falls into 3 parts. The first is before the son leaves home, the second is when he's away from home, and the third is when he returns home. For a few moments I want to look at the younger son before he leaves home. What kind of boy is he? Well, he gives himself away with the first words he says, "Give me." There's an intense selfishness involved there. It reminds me of Samson, who the first 2 sentences he said contained, when he spoke to his parents, contained the words, "Get her for me," talking about a Philistine woman, which was quite forbidden. So they got her for him, and a lot of good that did him. But this boy is intensely selfish. He wants pleasure without responsibility, and he wants his freedom. Perhaps he's suffering from the second son syndrome. Now, in that culture, as in British hierarchical culture, the property always went to the older son. He was never going to inherit the land. He would never be lord of the estate, and perhaps that got to him. It's not for nothing that Harry called his book Spare. He was a spare part, and he, like the prodigal son, went to a far country to try to find his freedom. But freedom's a very elusive thing. And so this boy is very selfish, but it's worse than that. At the heart of the story is a very unpleasant truth. The boy says, "Give me my share of the inheritance." Now, when do we get our inheritance? We get it when our parents die. Under the surface, this boy wishes his father were dead. He wants his father out of his life. Now, that's the prime sin of the human race. When symbolically the serpent was talking to Eve, he said to her, "The day you eat of that fruit, you will be like God." And she looked at it, and it was pleasing to the eye. She wanted to be like God. She wanted to be God. She so wanted not to be answerable to anybody. As the song says, "I belong to me," the primal sin of the human race. She bought the big lie. And the big lie is that if we let God get too close, if we let God have complete control over our lives, it will in some way diminish and lessen us, in complete contradiction to what Jesus said, "I have come that you may have life to the full." And so the son is bought into the big lie that if he gets too close to his father, it'll somehow diminish him. He wants to get away. Somehow he has lived in the same house with that father for maybe 20 years and has never formed a relationship with him. And the parable gives no idea that the father's to blame for that, quite the contrary. The son has lived with him all these years and never discovered his wonderful generosity and kindness. It reminds me of Absalom with his father, King David, and they became estranged, and we read, Absalom lived 3 full years in Jerusalem and never once beheld the king's face. And so I suppose it's possible to live in a Christian environment, a religious environment, and kind of never form a real relationship with God. Well, one thing we can do is actually use the boy's very words, except use them humbly. Father, give me, if you will, a real relationship with you. And so I'm sure nobody watching this has got no relationship with God. I don't think you'd be watching the video. But Lent is a time of self-examination, and just perhaps to check that hidden away somewhere in my soul, there's not just that little hint of believing that if I get really close to God, it will somehow deplete my life. But the encouraging theme of this whole parable is that whether the son knows it or not, the Father is constantly working and waiting to give him the relationship that deep down he really longs for.
Unending love, amazing grace.